One. The SAMMI Cannold. Thanks for coming on the show. And director, film, theater, full-time freelance. Tell me a little bit more about who you are, what you do, what you've been up to.
As you said, I'm a director of theater and film. I started out directing musicals primarily, and I still direct musicals in New York and regionally and around the world. And I now also direct film. So I just completed my first documentary feature film, and I'm working on a number of features and TV as well. So trying to cross a number of different mediums in service of telling stories about meaningful things.
Yeah, I love that. Just like not really boxing yourself in and willing to jump into any real arena. So the recent documentary, tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. It's called The Show Must Go On, and it's about the survival of theater during the pandemic. So it was shot primarily in South Korea in 2020. And basically we were following two productions that pushed ahead towards opening night against all odds. And it's sort of about the journey of those productions, and as well as a number of folks in the theater community, including Angela Weber, who have been very vocal about the importance of the survival of the performing arts. So it is a manifesto about the importance of the work of this industry that serves so many, not just in the industry, but also in so many adjacent industries that rely on the theater, and audience members who rely on coming to the theater as a means of escape and feeling, and all the reasons why those of us who adore the theater feel its survival is imperative.
So I think it's unique. It's a documentary. You also direct theater, but now you're doing a documentary about theater and that
Yeah.
sort of thing. What was the biggest thing that stood out in that documentary? Was it attendance? Was it virtual attendance? Was it was it theater? And I know there was a lot of table reads, if not actual theater productions, where they kind of experimented with Zoom or whatever else, to using those mediums to still kind of get the production out there. But what stood out about this production?
So our film follows two productions that went ahead physically. So in the sense that they went ahead live, in the case of one of at different points for the intention of having full capacity audiences. So in South Korea, the theater industry there barely shut down because they figured out how to keep it open safely amidst everything that was going on in the pandemic. So we focus in on actual, physical live theater, not to in any way short shrift theater happening on Zoom or live captured theater, but the film is specifically about theater in the sort of traditional form that we know it, and how we make that sustainable in a world where it seems this threat is even now not going to go away.
Okay, the show must go on. So you mentioned some other productions. What else? Well, before we get into that, how have you been impacted? How were you impacted, say professionally, creatively, productively in the last year?
Enormously, and I think that that's really particularly true of anybody who works in the performing arts. I guess particularly in the live sector, because our jobs rely on people gathering in place, which was exactly, what we were told not to do.
Right.
And so I think that, we say this a lot in the theater community, that we were the first to close and will be the last to reopen, because of the nature of what we do. And I think it's so, Broadway alone supports 96,000 jobs. That's just one city. There are theaters in every city around the country, around the world.
Yeah.
And so we for me personally, I had a number of productions that I was directing that were all canceled or postponed in various forms, which is tricky when you're freelance because it's not like there's a furlough scheme for freelancers. The work just goes away. And so it was hard. And I was lucky in the sense that the opportunity to make this film came around. So I had something not only to make a little bit of a living off of, but also to put my creative energy towards. So I'm very grateful for that because I spent the first 100 days of the pandemic completely out of work. And then, after finishing the film, out of work for a long time, which I think, is the case for 90% of our industry, except for folks who have jobs at institutions that were critical for the ongoing, running of those institutions.
So the film, The Show Must Go On, that was the one film you said you had during the pandemic, and then it was a little bit of nothing afterward.
Yeah, I mean, the way that at least my life works, I'm always working in the sense that I'm always, prepping projects, or I was able to figure out how to fill the time, but not in the sense that my job drives towards being in a rehearsal room with actors, and that all evaporated. So I think that that's what went away. I can sit in my room and prep pitch decks all I want, but that's not, actually the meat of the work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely took advantage of it by outlining a lot of stuff and prepping a lot of stuff, putting together a lot of packages, but then it's just shelving those and finishing scripts and shelving those.
Right.
And it's like, okay, once the floodgates open. But you mentioned furlough. That was like the big word that everybody kept saying. That was the title that everybody was taking on, I think, from like March to June, is furloughed, furloughed, furloughed. And you're right, that's not necessarily something, especially with theater, to be temporarily laid off. I mean, it's like if a production is done, a production is done,
Right.
or closed, or canceled, or what have you. But have you been, so now here we are a year later, actually, a little over a year later, like what is it, 16 months. Have you been back on set, back on stage, back out there in the field?
A little bit. So I live in New York, and our industry, sort of the epicenter of it is Broadway, and Broadway sort of started reopening with Bruce Springsteen's show, because it's in a Broadway house right now, in late June. And then the first Broadway play will reopen on August 4th. So that is a beacon of hope for all of us, as we go forward. But I think that, and I've had a few opportunities to film music videos or rehearse concerts or things like that, but not yet to be back in a full rehearsal process. That really starts for me towards the end of August.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're all very closely watching what's happening with the Delta variant and what's happening over in London right now, because it's just for the West End in London right now, it is very scary for us to watch that, because what's happening is a lot of shows are shutting down because members of their companies are coming into contact with folks who tested positive. And then the way that the rules work in London, it's forcing the entire show to shut down. So that's very scary to us here, because we want to barrel towards reopening. We want to say 100% we're going. But I think in the back of all of our heads, there's this fear of, oh God, what happens if we start getting capacity restrictions again? Because theater, is not an industry that can operate at half capacity. Like, I mean, it can for a time, sort of on life support, but our margins are so tight already that in order to, have any hope of like breaking even, you have to be at full capacity. So, the fight's not over, but I mean, for a while it looked like it was over, and I hope we get back there again. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, nothing's ever truly over. I mean, we've constantly gone through stages of shutdowns and furloughs before, and we just waited it out. And I know some people lost money, some people lost jobs, but it always picks back up. Whether hey, of course a vaccine's going to come out. Of course it is. So it's that patience, and it's never completely end of days, doomsday, kind of situation. I mean, and so I think that's what a lot of people came to realize is this too shall pass type of mentality, and we'll get back out there. We'll pick up the show. We'll and for me, as it turned out, I think a couple months, 2 or 3, 4 months in the pandemic, then it was decided that film, audio, and video production and film and video production were eventually decided to be essential workers, and so then that's why they, instituted the COVID compliance officer, and now I think it's called a COVID compliance manager, something like that. But was that ever decided? Was theater ever considered? Theater was probably never considered essential workers. Was that the case?
not in this country. I mean, we basically got the go ahead. I guess it was in April when Cuomo suddenly was like, everything can reopen at full capacity. I'm just talking about New York because that's sort of what my specific viewpoint is. But
April of 2021.
2021, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there were certain exceptions like last summer where if you followed a very, very specific set of protocol, you could open things. Like I know there was like a production of Godspell in the Berkshires where everybody was outside and they were in a tent, but the actors were like separated from each other with plexiglass and things like that. But it made it very difficult to I mean, they did a heroic job, like hats off to them. But I think it wasn't really until recently that we were really allowed to go back to work. But the issue has always really been the audience, right? Because there are certain precautions that can be made to gather, if you have like a really, really small play, you need maybe 20 people in the room to gather those 20 people into the room to make sure they're all tested, whatever. But as soon as you're inviting in a public audience who, you can require vaccination, you can require masking, you get like, all these things, but that's where it gets complicated. But that's also where I think the example of Korea actually proves that there's a way to proceed safely if we're following protocol in the way that they did.
Yeah. There was a couple of articles that came out. There was a punk show, this cult favorite punk band or punk show festival, I think in Los Angeles, where they were charging $15 a ticket for those vaccinated and $1,000 for those not vaccinated. And they're just trying to push for that, herd immunity, the people to get vaccinated. And if you really want to see this show, get vaccinated, and it's only $18 or $18, something like that. And then it was just $1,000. I think it was $999 if you're not vaccinated to come to the show. And they're just kind of pushing, and they're kind of experimenting that and using that influence of that show, that entertainment. I think, and I don't know about you, but thinking of theater and Broadway, and like I'm a big pro wrestling fan, and pro wrestling is pretty much on that same stage of like the circus. But AEW wrestling was doing the same thing. I think they were really pushing herd immunity and people to get vaccinated so that they could get back to full capacity and put on the same shows, the traveling shows. Because for the last year, AEW was only doing their Wednesday night wrestling shows at Daly's Place in Florida, same place every week. And they started off with no fans in there. They would have the wrestlers not working that night, kind of in the front row cheering, and of course they're told who to cheer for, so everything's scripted anyway. And then yeah, as it progressed, I think they were opening Daly's place up to about 50% capacity, but it was still every week it was at that same place, Daly's place in Florida. Now they're back on the road traveling, 100, depending on whatever capacity these venues will allow. But they were really, I think they were doing some, tickets. So they were only selling tickets to those vaccinated or something like that. They have to look out for the health of their performers as well. But to back to back to that play that you mentioned where they were out in the open and separated by plexiglass. I mean, I think we saw a lot of innovation and a lot of thinking outside the box and a lot of creativity to further our creativity in a sense, in a way to put that is that there was a film on Shudder. There was a horror film. It was a Shudder original called Host, where there were a couple of people in New York and London that were quarantined, so they want to have a Zoom happy hour, but then somehow they want to have a Zoom happy hour / seance, and they released a demon, and then the demon was going through Zoom and possessing and killing all the different people that are just in this Zoom 4-way, 6-way Zoom happy hour. And wow. They found this way to use Zoom. Obviously we can relate, right? Everybody's been using Zoom, and it's just a lot like, that's the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of the play of separated by plexiglass. Listen, we're still going to do it, try to pull it off, do the best that we can kind of mentality, like think outside the box.
Yeah. Absolutely.
No, you go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna agree. It's led to a lot of out of the box thinking and innovation to keep making art. So that's I guess silver lining of sorts.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned a couple of other films in the works. What's next on the agenda? What's the next set of goals? Next set of plans? What's next on the agenda for SAMMI CANNOLD?
Unfortunately, a lot of stuff I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but
I get that.
Doing a lot of readings of new musicals and new plays this fall, which I'm very excited about. We will soon have a premiere of the film that I mentioned, The Show Must Go On. And then I go back into rehearsal for productions starting in the winter. So, we're slowly getting back on our feet, but I am grateful to have a lot of stories that, or shows that I'm working on that are stories that I really believe in and believe that they speak to the present moment in ways that will, in some cases, give folks a means of escape, and in some cases, give folks a means of introspection. So I'm grateful to sort of have a variety of projects that will be able to speak to what we're experiencing right now.
Awesome. So, touching upon that, what drives you? What's your driving force as a theater director, as a freelancer, as an artist?
I think mostly the desire to drive other people, I guess, because I think that as a director, I have the ability to bring stories to life that not only entertain people, hopefully, but also impel action. So I think that that's a really exciting position to be in, and it's one that has a lot of responsibility attached to it. But I think about that in every piece that I work on, what's going to be the impact of this? Is it, what is my intended impact? Is it to make people empathize with a character they didn't think they would empathize with? Is it to, encourage people to go out and act in some specific way? Is it to encourage people to care about something they might not have cared about before? So I think theater as a vehicle for action, even if that's simply just, is it to make people feel compassion for another human. That's like a beautiful thing that I think theater and other art forms can do. So I try to make things in a way that is about what the impact is going to be, not necessarily in ticket sales or in who likes it or who doesn't, but in what a given audience member on a given night is going to take away from it.
Sure. Yeah. Now that's astounding, and I can't agree more. I mean, for me, it was always to just be involved with other creatives. I mean, obviously, when I was a kid, I wanted to become a filmmaker and possibly an actor because I was a big film buff, and my driving force from the start was always, I want to do something that I'm going to love. I don't want to like do something that because someone told me, oh, the money's here. This is where the financial security is in this industry. I always wanted to just do what I wanted to do what I would love, because that is an extra incentive. And then getting involved with other folks that are willing to take that risk and experiment. And like you said, there might be a little bit of that. I want to drive others to drive me to network, to collaborate, to continue this big mixing pot of creativity and ideas and new and bizarre kind of films and TV shows and YouTube web series or whatever the new thing is coming out. But yeah. So for me, April. Okay, so March 12th was when Maryland went into quarantine anyway. So as far as the new year would be, and I wasn't really thinking of January 1st of 2021. I was thinking, somewhere in March. What's March? What's going to happen in March 2021? And now here we are. It's already July, almost August now. But if I were to ask you, what's the new year, new normal, new you? What comes to mind after this last year and a half? What's the new year, new normal, new you?
I don't think I've personally changed that much. I think I am fundamentally the same person. I mean, I deeply respect people who've gone through sort of personal transformations during this time. I think if anything, I've gotten into, I guess on a personal level, sort of more of a routine, in the sense that because we don't really have weekends in theater, it's very easy to just just keep going. You don't really think there's no really like, this is the finish line to the week. And I think that the pandemic has taught me about weekends. And not that that's necessarily something I can sustain, because once we go back into rehearsal, I don't think that will necessarily be much of a thing. But it has allowed me to sort of like create a new routine for myself that I think is a bit healthier, that hopefully that will sustain, just in terms of like the amount of sleep I get and, eating healthy and, recently this month exercise, which we'll see if that sustains. So I think,
Right.
I think that's been a journey for many people over this time of like, depending on, whatever work we were doing, there was a sense of burnout. I don't really intend to work any less hard once things come back, but I think it's about the structure of when I'm working and how I'm working that I think I can sort of control in ways that are perhaps more sustainable.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Sorry about that. Yeah. So go back to, well, first off, about the exercise. So you're saying you started to exercise more. And for me, I used to exercise a lot before. And then when the pandemic happened, that went out the window. Me and the wife brought home a kid right before the pandemic. So while he's in the bassinet, I think even March, April, and May, I even looked at my run app and I was still running, still doing like, the weights. And then I think pandemic plus, as he got a little bit older and he's crawling around and got to be more hands-on, I looked at my run app and it was running from May 2020 exactly to May 2021. I had not run for a straight year because it was no time for it. And I think that's amazing that you did like the opposite, like you found time to make it happen. But going, yeah, what were we gonna say?
No, I barely exercised at all before
Okay.
the pandemic. So I think it's not, I'm sort of getting to like human base level of exercise now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were saying something about the weekends. Like what do you you guys work through the weekends and then right in the next week and then the weekend, then the week?
Yeah, because so the theatrical day off usually is Mondays in America. So because you want to have shows on the weekend because that's when people come to see things, right? So so normally what happens is you work Tuesday to Sunday on whatever show you're working on, but then because Monday is a business day for the rest of the world, you sort of end up working Monday too. So I think that, you know, I don't know how it will be when I'm back in rehearsal, but I guess what I've found as a rhythm for now is that I save any sort of like big creative projects that I have to do for the weekends when I know that my like email's going to be slower and I can really focus. And like that's like scripts I have to read or things like that. I just sort of put it to the weekends. And then during the week, I sort of deal with the day-to-day email, you know,
Yeah.
operations, because I think that's something that's sort of a little bit deceptive about a job like directing, at least in theater, is that, you know, like 70% of it is logistics and admin, and like 30% of it is, you know, creative interfacing with other artists, you know, in a room. So I think that that 70% really goes in the week for me, and then the 30% of like being creative right now really goes on the weekends.
Yeah. Okay. That's yeah. Yeah, because you know, I think in film and TV, it depends on whatever days. If you need to shoot weekends, but it's usually maybe a day or two off. It might be 8 to 12 hour days, might be 5 days a week or 6 days a week. But yeah, that makes sense for, you know, obviously the show's gonna the production will be shown live on stage on the weekend. Yeah. So if there was one last point, one last bit of advice to, you know, like the 2 or 3 viewers that I have, but if there was one last bit of advice, one last, you know, point to make, what would that be to anybody watching? A creative, you know, someone in theater, someone, an actor, but anybody in the creative, professional. It could be a personal advice, it could be professional advice.
I'm going to give a very specific piece, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is my personal soapbox that I will get on any chance I get, which is that anybody who is a freelance artist should please have a website, because it those of us who have hiring power, decision making power, which is sort of a gross way to put it, but you know what I mean, get asked all the time to recommend or refer other people. Somebody will say, "Oh, do you have a costume designer who might be good for this? Do you know an actor who could play this role?" Whatever. And if you say, "Oh, this person," but I have no evidence to show you why they would be good, it's very hard for someone to take that recommendation unless they really like are going to go do the work and look into it, which they might, but you sort of want to give yourself the best possible chance you can. And I think particularly for actors, and I think this goes in film and in theater, that so I don't think actors necessarily, for the most part, know how on our side of the table, so often before actors are even called into the room, we're saying, "Oh, I'd love to see this person and this person and this person and this person." And if I say to my collaborators, "Oh my gosh, you know, like Joe so-and-so would be great for this, but I can't show you why,"
Right.
it's an uphill battle. And I
Yep.
think that actors and designers and artists and even stage managers can put themselves in a position, even if it's as simple as, you know, for stage manager, having a landing page where someone can find your resume and a way to contact you. But for actors, I think it should really be like videos of you doing what you do, because then it sort of allows folks like us on this side of the table to say, well, they would be great for this, they would be great for this.
Yeah. And so you really hit a very sensitive subject for me. For the past 5 or 6 years, I've had, a couple of colleagues. There was this, so well, I couldn't agree more, obviously, because, for example, there was a colleague of mine, and he was pushing this actress. I mean, I'm sure they were in a relationship or something, and he just wanted me to give her work or collaborate with her on something. And I said, hey, that's outstanding. Send me a link to her work. Send me a link to your work on, it's 20, I mean, now it's 2021. Even then, if it was 2020, it's 2019. I think at the time it was 2019. Send me a link to your work. And I get 2 pictures from her Facebook of something she did modeling like 3 or 4 years, in 2015, and here it is 2019. I'm like, do you have a website? Do you have an actor's reel? Are you on IMDb? I mean, it's 2019, man. Like, do we have any kind of stuff? And there's 2 pictures, but he's pushing her to be like a co-producer, act in the production, accountant, business, a business manager for the production company in a whole. And I'm like, does she have a website? Does she have references? I mean, where's her LinkedIn? There's no references on her LinkedIn, and there was this whole thing, and I'm asking the simplest questions, and I can't even get an answer to the simplest questions. What has she done? And if she had a web,
I'm vocal about it, because I think that I don't blame actors, because I think some of them just like legitimately don't know. They think that like you go into the audition room and you do your work there. Yeah. And I think that's like totally correct, and like how it used to be. Yeah. But now so much is happening, in a very different way. And I talk to actors.
2021. It's 2021, and like you said, you've been working around this. We're working around this pandemic now, so I can't get 40 people into a building to sit in line and interview people. We kind of have to fast track that with an IMDb page or a website or an actor's reel, and then get you in for and maybe whittle those 40 interviews down to 10 immediate callbacks or something like that.
I just think everybody should make a website.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, especially if you have film and TV, I mean, if someone just has an IMDb, that's all I need to see. And most times that's all I need.
Because I think for me, it's about like, not necessarily what people's credits are, but what the quality, like what their actual work is, because I think it's about fit, not necessarily like prestige. Someone could have never been hired before for me, and they could be the perfect person for a role. It's just about having evidence of their work,
No, that's a great point. So, I mean, this website might kind of tell a specific website for a specific individual would tell a better story, not only about their previous work, but who they are, exactly.
Who they are, what they're good at. And I think that, particularly in my world, the musical theater world, so much of what we need to know before we even consider someone for a role is like, are we in the right universe of like, can the person sing the part? Like we have voice types in theater. So if I have like an operatic soprano role, I'm not going to bring in someone who is like a soulful alto. Like, you really have to match people with what they're good at, or it wastes everybody's time. So a website is one of the ways that you can sort of quickly check and be like, oh, yep, that's the style that they sing it. Perfect. They would be great for this. Let's see if how they do on the material.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, Sammy Cannold, I can't thank you enough for coming on. Any plugs, links, socials, sites that you want to
Uh,
plug and put out there?
I have a website. It's on Google. No, I'm all good. Thank you for having
All
me.
right. Well, I'll have some of Sammy's links in the description below. And Sammy, again, I know you got to go. You mentioned some projects you got in the works, so I can't wait to hear about those down the line and see what comes out. And so we'll just stand by. We'll talk a little bit offline. To the viewers out there, if you want to become an honorary member of the Zombie Squad, send me some, hit me up on any of the socials. Send me the name that you want to be credited as a honorary member of Zombie Squad. Send me your favorite 1 or 2 profile pictures, avatars, what have you, your profile pictures on Instagram, Facebook, whatever, and we can squad you up. I will make you an honorary member of the Zombie Squad, and I'll design all the stuff. I'll design a t-shirt, I'll design your logo, your whole Zombie Squad kind of profile if you want to be an honorary member of Zombie Squad, and give you the options to buy a t-shirt, to buy a phone case, to buy a pillow, to buy a tapestry, to buy a hoodie, to whatever the hell you want. But if you want to be an honorary member of the Zombie Squad, let me know. And
but they got to put in the work.